Hello, I'm Anson. Welcome to the heart of North Carolina's agricultural country. It's quiet here today, but this red clay soil has a way of producing giants.
History often builds monuments to presidents and generals, but it sometimes overlooks the fighters,
The ones who stood shoulder to shoulder with the common man when the odds were stacked against them. Right here in Anson County, back in 1837, one such fighter and great man was born. His name was L.L. Polk. I'd like to now introduce to you our historian, who knows more about L.L. Polk than anyone. Harvey, welcome to the project.
Thank you, Anson. It's a pleasure to be here live on TV. Speaking of Colonel Polk, I'd like to add a couple things. I think everyone here should know he was a man of many talents, a Confederate officer who became a progressive reformer, and then a simple gentleman farmer who rose to become perhaps the most influential voice for agriculture in late 19th century America. His life was a whirlwind of ambition, tragedy, and relentless advocacy, cut short just as he was poised to change the national political landscape forever. Today, we're going to tell his story. To understand the fire that drove Leonidas Polk until his untimely death in 1892, you first have to understand the world he was born into. He was born in 1837 on a plantation in Anson County, North Carolina, into a family with deep American Revolutionary War roots. You see, our North Carolina L.L. Polk came from a very distinguished lineage. His great-great-grandfather was Colonel William Polk, a Scots-Irish immigrant who moved from Carlisle, Pennsylvania, down to Anson County. He fought in the American Revolution as a colonel in the Continental Army. And notably, William's son was President James K. Polk. L.L. Polk was raised by his parents, Andrew and Cyrene Autry Polk, but tragedy struck the family early. His father died in 1851, and his mother followed just 2 years later. This left him orphaned at the tender age of 15, suddenly inheriting 353 acres of land. It was a lot for a young man to manage, but he wasn't alone. His 3 older brothers and the neighbors in the community stepped in to help raise him. Under their guidance and oversight, young L.L. Polk was molded into a true gentleman farmer. In 1855, at the age of 18, he entered Davidson College. There he studied under Major Daniel Harvey Hill, a man who would later command the 1st North Carolina Regiment as a Confederate Major General. During his time at Davidson, Polk earned election to the prestigious Humanian Society, one of only 15 students chosen for the honor. He left school shortly thereafter, however, returning home to the family farm in Anson County. A year and a half after returning home to manage the farm, L.L. Polk married Sarah Gaddy, a graduate of Salem Academy. Though his college days were behind him, his education didn't stop. He devoted his evenings to reading extensively from his personal library, devouring history, biography, poetry, and religious works, with the Holy Bible always holding a place of honor. This passion for learning turned him into a well-educated man and a talented orator. He was a natural student, and that self-taught discipline would carry him for the rest of his life. As tensions between North and South intensified in the late 1850s, Polk found himself drawn into the political fray.
Lincoln's stance on the Union is the only path forward, madam. We must preserve it at all costs.
By early 1860, he was in Raleigh representing Anson County. where his commanding voice and oratorical skills quickly caught people's attention.
Together, we shall build a better tomorrow for this great county, a tomorrow worthy of our shared legacy.
At just 23 years old, he launched a bid for the House of Commons. The result was undeniable. He led the three-man ticket by 791 votes, a landslide victory that proved just how popular he had become. During this period, the Democratic Party's supremacy faced serious threats. The 1860 campaign and the subsequent election of Abraham Lincoln exposed the hard truth that the two regions had opposing economic requirements. It laid bare the deep divisions between North and South, particularly regarding states' rights. When the South looked at the election results, they saw a government completely controlled by a region hostile to their economic and social survival. This fear led directly to the secession crisis. Across the South, a consensus began to grow. They would be better off severing their ties with the Union completely. Polk addressed the growing tensions head-on. When the legislature reassembled in May 1861, he declared that Lincoln's fanatical hardness would meet bitter resistance in North Carolina. Upon returning home, he delivered a stark message to his neighbors.
We are not battling for any minor considerations, but for our lives. With sorrow, we now cooperate and unity with the majority feeling of our state.
The bill for the establishment of the state militia is hereby ratified.
On September 20th, 1861, the legislature ratified a bill creating a state militia of 20 brigades and 116 regiments. Polk, who chaired the legislation committee, received a commission as colonel. He returned home immediately to organize the Anson County Militia. Colonel L.L. Polk requests the officers, commissioned and non-commissioned of the regiment, to meet at Piney Grove Church Friday the 7th of February at 9:30 o'clock for the purpose of drill. After training on drill and marching skills, they soon headed to Raleigh. Once there, they were absorbed into the 26th Regiment under the command of Colonel Zebulon Vance and continued their training at Camp Crabtree in Raleigh. Though Polk had to enlist in the regular army as a private, he had been commissioned as a colonel in order to raise and command the Anson County Militia. He was known for the rest of his life, especially in his later years, as Colonel Polk. His leadership capabilities were obvious, recognized by Colonel Vance when they arrived in Raleigh. He was rapidly promoted to sergeant major, serving directly on the colonel's staff. Starting in May and throughout June of 1862, the NC 26th Regiment were the first to reach and engage the enemy in Bethel, and they left there to operate near Kinston, North Carolina, giving Polk the true taste of battle. The respite was short. The regiment was soon ordered north to Virginia, where they were thrown into heavy fighting in and around Richmond. In July of '62, Colonel Vance led the 26th North Carolina during the 7 days battles, including Malvern Hill. Later in August, Vance and the 26th were fighting in the trenches near Petersburg, Virginia. That's when he received the word that he had won the election for governor of North Carolina. All the men highly respected Colonel Vance, including his friend L.L. Polk. The regiment was in the field near Petersburg, Virginia, when the transition took place. To honor their leader, the officers held a ceremony to present him with a sword, and the task of delivering the presentation speech fell to Sergeant Major Polk. Known even then for his eloquence, Polk spoke on behalf of the regiment to express their mixed emotions. deep pride in his election, but sincere regret at his departure. He highlighted Vance's leadership and his fierce dedication to his soldiers' welfare, qualities that had endeared the colonel to every man in the ranks, the ones who stood shoulder to shoulder with the common man when the odds were stacked against them. This moment was significant, forging a lifelong bond between the two men. So deep was this attachment that after Vance left to become governor, Polk decided he could not remain in the 26th without him. At that time, the NC 43rd Regiment was being absorbed into the NC 26th. He had a promotional opportunity to become a commissioned officer as a lieutenant in the 43rd under Robert F. Polk, and he took it. At the time, the 43rd North Carolina was serving close to home, defending Kinston and Wilmington, and had not yet been attached to the main army of Northern Virginia. They moved rapidly, from Richmond to Lynchburg, and then on to Fredericksburg, before turning north to join General Lee for the invasion of Pennsylvania. However, Polk would not join them on that fateful campaign. Stricken with liver fever, he was forced to remain behind. After finally recovering from the dreaded liver fever, Polk wasted no time. He walked 74 miles in just 2.5 days to rejoin his regiment, a grueling trek that took him straight through the Shenandoah Valley. In June 1863, as his regiment pushed north to invade Maryland and Pennsylvania, Polk wrote home to his wife. In his letter, he said,
Dear Sally, I write to you on Yankee paper with a gold pen and Yankee envelope with Yankee ink, smoking a Yankee cigar, coffee full of Yankee sugar with a Yankee sword, Navy repeater, and other fixins. We had an awful time. I did not get anything myself. The boys gave me what I got, except a few things I bought. They gave me 3 pairs of kid gloves for you, slightly damaged. For the children, a round comb apiece. The boys gave me a fine spyglass.
Meanwhile, other countries had noticed the uptick in the northern aggression towards the South by sending in troops. In the quiet background, the South had started gaining support from other nations. France's Napoleon III had secretly authorized the construction of 4 corvettes and 2 heavy ironclad rams in French shipyards, vessels expressly designed to break the Union blockade. The North realized that private French companies were supplying the Confederates with cannons, rifles, and uniforms, and that the threat of intervention was growing. That is when the issue of slavery came into play. Lincoln knew that if he reframed the war to be about the question of slavery in the South, it would work to his favor. He viewed a permanently divided America as geopolitically beneficial for both Europe and France. However, when the U.S. government discovered the plot and threatened war, Napoleon lost his nerve. He ordered the ships seized, yet one vessel managed to slip through the net. Its name was the CSS Stonewall. Meanwhile, back home, while L.L. Polk was away serving with the Confederate Army, Sarah kept a photograph of him by her bedside. The image showed him wearing his Humanian Society pin. When Sherman's forces swept through the region, burning and pillaging homes and farms across the South, A young Union lieutenant forced his way into the master bedroom. There, Sarah, her daughters, had gathered in fear. But then the officer spotted the photograph by the bedside.
Stop right there.
He recognized the Humanian Society insignia immediately. He too had been elected to the society years earlier, a distinction he valued highly. In an instant his demeanor changed. He apologized for the intrusion and ordered his men to return everything they had taken. He even left money on the kitchen table for the food they had consumed and forbade them from taking a single chicken. This act of brotherhood across battle lines saved the Polk family from devastation. On July 1st, 1863, Polk fought at the Battle of Gettysburg under Major General Rhodes in the 2nd Army Corps. He was in the thick of the action, fighting on Seminary Ridge and around the Culp's Hill area. The regiment suffered heavily, with 29 killed and 129 wounded. Polk himself was struck in the leg by a Minnie ball.
I was not sensible of the wound until the battle was over. The Yankees had taken all of my clothes except what I have on, but I do have some money.
That wound would stay with him. For the rest of his life, Polk used a cane, a constant physical reminder of the battle. In March 1864, the men of his regiment urged Polk to run for the House of Commons. On April 8th, the voters of Anson County unanimously nominated him. He was just 27 years old. At the time he received the news, Polk was in Kinston, North Carolina. His regiment, however, was far away, deep in its grueling 1,000-mile campaign. In a testament to their loyalty, the soldiers had cast their votes for him, all the way from Martinsburg, West Virginia. During the latter half of 1864, the 43rd was heavily engaged in the Shenandoah Valley. They spent months fortifying positions, destroying railroads and bridges, and battling the Federal Sixth Corps. It was a campaign of strategic delay. General Early's goal was to keep General Sheridan occupied in the valley, preventing him from reinforcing Grant's army near Richmond. Polk wrote about the unusual camaraderie between the lines.
Our pickets and the Yankees exchange papers, talk, and seem to be more neighbors than enemies. One of the Yankees told us yesterday that they were expecting a supply of winter clothing and that we ought not to fight them until it was received, as we would be sure to get all of it from them.
Men, I have some news.
On a cold winter night in Newmarket, Virginia, Polk addressed his men from the front of his tent.
I've been officially elected to the House of Commons.
Shortly thereafter, the officers convened a formal meeting.
43rd North Carolina Regiment, Newmarket, Virginia, December 5th, 1864. Whereas our brother officer, Lieutenant L.L. Polk, having been elected to the legislature of North Carolina, and having left us to take his seat in that honorable body, therefore resolved, that while we are highly gratified at the honor thus conferred upon him, we deeply regret that in future we are to be deprived of his association as a Christian gentleman and his aid and example as a gallant officer. Resolve, second, that his gentlemanly deportment, his upright and moral conduct, together with his gallant bearing as an officer, have won for him the esteem and confidence of the officers and men of the 43rd North Carolina Regiment.
The soldiers responded with 3 hearty cheers. After a long 7-day journey back on a Raleigh-bound train, Polk was finally back to serve on the House Legislation Committee on December 18, 1864. While he was excited to be back and close to home and ready to represent Anson County, he wrote to Sarah back home,
I will be sure to come home soon. I cannot stay in Raleigh after my shirt I have on gets dirty. I look forward to seeing my dear Sally and the girls.
He had come to Raleigh with only his Army uniform and gear, had to buy a new shirt, jacket, tie, and trousers. Returning in only 10 days, he immediately focused on improving condition for the common soldier. He introduced resolutions to address the hardships imposed by military orders, determined to provide relief for the men who had gone off to war. In April 1865, just as his first legislative session was drawing to a close, the news arrived General Lee had surrendered to Grant. With the war over, the task turned to rebuilding. Polk was elected to the Constitutional Convention that formally restored North Carolina to the Union. After the war, Polk returned home to the task of rebuilding. In 1874, he opened a country store at a site that was soon to become the Polkton Railroad Station. In a back room of the store, he launched the Ansonian, a weekly newspaper published directly from the store. Through the paper, he promoted Zebulon Vance for governor and championed the cause of agricultural diversification, urging farmers to simply bake your own bread and raise your own meats. He subdivided his plantation land to create new opportunities for growth, and as a result, the town of Polkton was born. It was officially incorporated in 1875. With the backing of Governor Vance, Polk helped establish the North Carolina State Department of Agriculture in 1877, and fittingly, he was named its very first agricultural commissioner. In 1880, when Vance was elected to the U.S. Senate and departed for Washington, Polk resigned from his post, citing sharp disagreements with the department's Democrats. He soon joined the Daily News as a corresponding editor. For Polk, it was a well-deserved break. He had fought in a real war, only to return home to fight what seemed like petty battles in the political theater.
We are not battling for minor consideration, but for our lives, our honor, in short, our all.
He had witnessed the harsh realities of Reconstruction firsthand. From the Union troops patrolling the streets of Raleigh to the strong-arm tactics that followed, the South was simply tired.
Look at this root system here.
Polk's commitment to agricultural education continued. 2 years later, in 1881, he took charge of the North Carolina State Fair and worked to reorganize the State Board of Agriculture. In 1886, Polk founded the Progressive Farmer magazine in Winston. He designed the publication to be a practical resource for farm families, but he also used it as a platform for reform. Through its pages, he advocated for transferring federal land grant funds away from UNC, pushing instead for a separate institution focused entirely on practical agricultural education. His efforts ultimately succeeded. In 1887, the North Carolina College of Agriculture and Mechanic Arts were established, laying the foundation for the institution we now know as North Carolina State University. Polk's Polk's influence soon reached far beyond North Carolina. In 1887, he was named National Vice President of the Farmers Alliance. And just 2 years later, in 1889, he rose to become its president. In December 1890, Polk traveled south to Ocala, Florida, for a pivotal moment in the agrarian movement, the National Farmers Alliance Convention. The event drew delegates from across the country. As president of the alliance, Polk presided over the proceedings and delivered the keynote addresses. It was here that the famous Ocala demands were adopted. This bold platform would later become the foundation for the Populist Party, but the spirit of these demands had been building for years. As early as 1887, Polk had already given voice to the struggle, articulating the plight of the Southern farmer with these words.
Our farmers buy everything to raise cotton, and raise cotton to buy everything.
And after going through this thread mill business for years, they lie down and die and leave their families penniless.
In 1890, Polk led the charge within the Baptist State Convention to establish a Baptist university for women. He was picking up the torch for a project that Thomas Meredith had begun. His efforts helped bring that vision to life. The institution he helped build would eventually be renamed Meredith College in 1904. In February 1892, Polk presided over the meeting that formally created the Populist Party. The Populists were prepared to nominate Polk for President of the United States, but he died unexpectedly at the train station in Washington, D.C., just 2 weeks before the nomination. He died at Garfield Hospital on June 11, 1892. His funeral was held at Raleigh's First Baptist Church, and he was buried in Raleigh's Oakwood Cemetery. In 1957, Colonel L.L. Polk was inducted into the North Carolina Agricultural Hall of Fame, cementing his legacy as a transformative leader in Southern agriculture and education.
We hope that you've enjoyed this story of L.L. Polk, a man's life that is worth noting in history.
A man who was driven to help every Southerner's plight, especially during the trying times of the war and the recovery afterwards. Harvey has done a great job breaking it down to help educate us. Thank you, Harvey.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Anson. I hope that our viewers enjoyed the production and learned a little about our L.L. Polk. His life and times still resonate with many of us today in ways sometimes unimaginable. We all benefit from his legacy in one way or another, here in the South especially. I hope you enjoyed the program.
Thank you, Harvey, from all of us.
If you visit his final resting place today, etched into the stone on his monument are his parting words, a final reflection on the journey he was about to take.
I am going now into the full glow of the coming day. Behind me lies the dark shadows of the valley. Before me lies the dark and deep river, which has no bridge.